I hope you're well. Hope Purim was nice. And I don't know if anyone is leaving Israel for Pesach.
We're all here.
You're all here? Okay. So it's convenient. When Mashiach comes, you'll be here. It'll save you a trip. Okay, so again, today, as I say, I'm just doing different topics, and you're always welcome to email me. The reason why I'm doing kind of different topics is because some of you have heard a lot of stuff on medical ethics. I will get back to it a little later, but I'll do some new stuff for a while. So what I wanted to talk about today is something very practical, especially before a Yom Tov, and that is the idea of being Toivel utensils. And when are you Toivel, when are you not Toivel? When do you make a bracha, when don't you make a bracha? What are the halachos if you're going to your parents and they have kosher dishes, but very often they were not immersed in a mikveh, and what are you supposed to do? But before I do that, I'm going to talk about something that maybe is a little less familiar to people, and that is some of the halachos regarding the construction of a mikveh. Now again, the average Orthodox Jew, man or woman, is not involved directly in constructing a mikveh, so you'd figure it's not something you need to know in terms of your life as a Jewish woman, but it is part of Torah, and I would think it would be interesting to know a little bit about what makes a mikveh a mikveh and the like. So first of all, keep in mind that there are two types of kosher immersions. There is what is called a mikveh, and there is what is called a Mayanot, right? Mayan. A mikveh is a collection of rainwater. A mayan is a spring that gushes up from the ground, even if the water accumulates in a mikveh area. For example, in Tzfat, where the Ari, there's the Arizal's mikveh, that is actually a mayan, that is a gushing spring. Now, both of them are kosher. A mikveh can either be in a collection of rainwater, or a mikveh can be a mayan, but there are two differences between mayan and mikveh. Number one, a mikveh is kosher only if the water is stationary. If the water is moving water, it is not kosher. So for example, you can normally not go to the mikveh in a river, because a river, a lot of the water comes from rainfall, and since the river is moving, it is not kosher. Rainwater is only kosher when it's stationary. Rainwater is not kosher when it is moving. So that's the problem with a river. A mayan, however, if you really have a gushing spring of water, that is kosher even if it is moving water. Now, halachically, this raises some other questions as well. Obviously, anytime you go to a mikveh, the water is moving back and forth. That's obvious, right? I mean, you're moving the water, but that's okay because that's movement within the mikveh bathtub, so to speak, itself. But halachically, if there's a crack in a mikveh, that can be surprisingly very severe. Let's imagine you have a regular mikveh, kosher mikveh, and the mikveh simply has a crack in the floor or a crack in the wall in which some of the water is seeping out. You have to realize that may make the whole mikveh pasul, because it is moving water out of the mikveh area, and that is a psul. And that's why one of the things that have to be supervised in a mikveh is to be sure there are no cracks or crevices, which allows the water to flow out. And that's not only because you'll lose your quantity. I mean, let's assume your mikveh is so big that there's plenty of water in the mikveh. You're not going to lose your quantity. But you can have a psul, and the technical word for that psul is called zechila. Zechila just means moving water. Zochalin is moving water. Zechila is movement, is a noun that means movement. But that is only a psul if your mikveh is from rainwater, which most mikvahs are. If your mikveh is a mayan, mayanot are mitaher even bizachila. Okay, so that's one difference in a mikveh and a mayan. A second difference is the minimum quantity of water that you need. A mikveh of rainwater is only kosher if it has a minimum amount of water. If it has less than that amount of water, the mikveh is invalid. Now, the quantity that a mikveh must have in halacha is given as 40 sa'ah. Sa'ah is a volume measurement, 40 sa'ah. And in modern terms, 40 sa'ah is approximately 600 liters of water. That's an approximate number. So what's a liter? You know what a liter is. If you're a metric system person, you know, and even if you're an American that doesn't think metrically, like I don't really think metrically, but I think about a big Coke bottle. A big Coke bottle, I think, is a liter. Is that correct?
How many liters?
600. So a mikveh is 600 liters. If all you have, and typically, by the way, an average mikveh has around 2,000 liters. So you're way up there. But technically, if the mikveh only has 599 liters, totally invalid, it's no good. But the halacha is true only if it's a mikveh of rainwater. If you have a mayan, a gushing spring, you actually don't need any quantity as long as whatever you're being tovel is covered up. Now, that does mean if you want to be tovel in a mayan, it still has to cover all of your body all at once. So that's going to be pretty close to the 40 sa. But let's say you want to be tovel a coffee mug, or you want to be tovel a small pot. Now, if you're using a regular mikveh, it still has to be 40 sa, even for a small pot. But if you're tovel in a mayan, you can be tovel even if it's less than 40 sa. Okay, so that's the rule number one to know. The two differences between mikveh, which is a collection of rainwater, and mayan, which is a gushing spring from the underground, and that is, rainwater is not kosher if it's moving. So again, I'll give you the Hebrew words. It is pasol bizochalin, and it is kosher only if it's ashboren. Ashboren is a term that means stationary water. Zochalin is a term that means moving water. And for practical purposes, that is why you cannot be tovel in a river. A lake is okay, right? A lake is stationary if it's a natural lake. A river is moving. And in addition, that is the problem with cracks in the floor or the sides of mikvahs, because you may be having a problem of zechila, so those cracks have to be repaired.
You can in a river, but not a lake.
No, the other way around. You cannot be tovel in a river, but you can be tovel in a lake. A river, huh?
Is the lake stationary? Yeah.
A lake is stationary, that's correct. A river is moving water, so moving water is a problem. Now it's interesting, according to this logic, you would think that the ocean would be no good, but Lamaisa, the ocean is good. That's kind of a special Gezerah Sakasov. So you can go to the mikveh in an ocean.
Why?
Because the Torah calls, the Torah uses the word mikveh by ocean. In the beginning of Bereshis, it says God called mikveh mayim, God called the collection of water a yam. So the Torah does call a yam is an ocean. It does call it a kosher mikveh, but a river is again, I'm simplifying a little bit, but a river is generally no good. A lake is good if it's natural. I'll talk about man-made lakes. That could be a very big problem. And a mayan does not need 40 sa'ah. So if I, for example, want to be tovel a cup or a small metal dish in a small mayan that is not 40 sa'ah, it would be kosher. But if I want to be tovel it in a mikveh that does not have 40 sa'ah, that would be pasul. Okay, so these are two differences between mikveh and mayan. Someone had a question? Someone had a hand up?
Yeah. So you said that moving water wouldn't be like kosher. So if rainwater. So if you're outside in rain and whatever it's raining and like, I don't know, you either like drink it on accident or like a drop falls, like is that an issue?
I mean, falls where in the mikveh? Where does it fall?
No, like to drink.
He's talking about for mikveh.
No. When I
No,
said
but to drink, you said it was an issue too, right?
oh no. You can drink moving water. I could open my mouth and drink rainwater. That's fine. No. I just said it's an issue of going to the mikveh. that it's not a kosher immersion in a mikveh if the water is moving. But if you're drinking, that's fine. You can drink moving water. Just be sure you make a bracha before it goes in your mouth. Yes.
What about snow or like a river that's somewhat frozen over so it's not really moving?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Of course, the question is, even if it's stationary, if it's ice or snow, it's not in a water state, right? So, in other words, that may be a separate problem.
It's just like the top layer is ice and you can like crack it.
Well, okay, I'll get to that. I mean, as you know, historically, there were many righteous women who, in places where there were no mikvahs, they would actually make a hole in the ice and go in. So it would be kosher, but again, only if the water is not moving. Only if it's not moving. Okay, so that's the difference between a mikvah and a mayan. Now, as I say, most mikvahs that you will encounter in the world are rainwater mikvahs. There aren't that many mikvahs that are based on springs. Probably the most famous spring mikvah is the Ariz mikvah in Tzfat, and I don't know if you went to it, depending on the year. Sometimes,
the whole curse.
Yeah. Sometimes women are allowed to go. Sometimes women are not allowed to go because there are a lot of men that are going. But what they say about the Arizal's mikvah is, well, you heard there was a curse?
Yeah, I heard that.
What was the curse? A curse for women or a curse generally?
A curse that if a woman, because some women will sneak in at night or when there's no guard around.
Yeah.
There's a curse.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that there are many years women are not allowed to go. Once in a while they'll make a Women's Day or something where they're allowed to go. But the thing about the Arizal's mikveh is that they say that anyone that goes to the Arizal's mikveh is given a divine promise that they will do tshuva before they die. Meaning it purifies them so they will come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is also, because it's a spring, it's a very fresh spring, so even though a lot of mikvahs are not the most pleasant place, sometimes they get dirty, but the Ariz mikvah is a very clean mikvah because spring water keeps on...
Yeah, if you drink the water and they say it's healing.
Yeah, it keeps on, you keep on getting fresh water, right? Yeah. And even though it's moving, that's fine because a spring is kosher even if it's moving water, right? So that's not a problem. It is also ice cold, very cold. So it's actually hard. I did it once as a much younger person. I have not had the courage to do it again, but I figured hopefully even the first time will give me the promise of tshuva. So I'm going to rely on that. But it is very ice cold, and spring mikvahs will tend to be cold because it's fresh water and it's gushing water and the like. But other than that, you're not going to encounter spring mikvahs very much. The typical mikvah is made from either rainwater or I'll get to ice and snow. That'll be fascinating. Now, here is the big problem. So now we have another issue about mikvah you need to know about. In order for the rainwater to be kosher, it cannot have gone through metal pipes or utensils or receptacles. Meaning to say, let's take a very simple situation. Why can't I use a bathtub? Okay, a bathtub is probably not 40 size, but let's assume I have a big bathtub. Why can't I just turn on the tap, fill up a swimming pool? Now, yeah, that comes from the reservoirs, but the reservoirs come from rainwater, right? So what is the problem with a bathtub or a swimming pool being a mikveh? There's enough water there, and a swimming pool is stationary water. It's not moving around. So the problem is simply this. The problem is that rainwater must enter the mikveh not through pipes, not through metal pipes, not through receptacles like pots and pans or conveyors. It must enter like directly from the sky. I'll discuss how that works. Which means, in other words, how does the rainwater get into the mikveh? Okay, it can't go in through the tap. It cannot go in through the plumbing system. It cannot even go in through pipes, right? So ideally, the way it should go in is you have a hole in the roof, so to speak, over the mikveh, and the rainwater just fills the mikveh by going through the hole in the roof. But that's a little impractical. So l'maisa, we have another way of doing it, and that is, the halacha is that if the pipes are not metal, if the pipes are rubber or plastic or even cement, that's considered to be an acceptable conduit for the rainwater. So therefore, the way water enters a mikveh, rainwater, we're not talking about spring water, the way rainwater enters a mikveh is not through pipes, not through plumbing, not through carrying it in a utensil like a pot or something and pouring it in. That would make the water pasul. It enters by essentially accumulating on the roof and then going through plastic, rubber, or cement pipes that are not susceptible to any type of ritual impurity, and that is how the water is collected. Now, again, I'm giving you a little technical vocabulary. The disqualification of water that goes through pipes or the tap system, that is called she'uvim. She'uvim means drawn water. Water, literally it means water that was drawn with a bucket, but that applies to anything that went through pipes. And she'uvim make a mikveh pasul, even if the water is stationary, and even if the water is 40 sa'ah. So in order for the water not to be she'uvim, it must enter the mikveh not through metal pipes or the like, or through a filtration system even. It must go through either a hole in the roof, and it simply goes through the air. Of course, then it has to be stationary when it lands. Or, as I say, plastic, rubber, or cement. Okay, now, so we talked a lot. So we talked about the psul of zochalin. Zochalin is movable water. And now we talked about the psul of she'uvim, which is drawn water, water that goes through pipes or the like. So now I'm going to mention a third problem. And that is, it takes a long time. Remember, you have to have 600 liters of rainwater going through, not going through the pipe system, not going through the tap. Now think about that. Let's imagine you're in Israel. How you're building a mikveh for your new community. And by the way, Chabad Shluchim have this problem all the time. They're building mikvahs in different places. And they have their mikvahs. They got their $1 million to build a mikveh. Now they have to fill it up. You would think, filling up mikveh is easy. Just turn on the tap. Takes time, 2 minutes. No, you got to get 600 liters of rainwater that comes through your roof. You know how long that's going to take? That can take a very, very, very long time. That could take a year. It could take more than a year. And there may be places in the world where you're not going to get that amount of rainwater. So what on earth do you do? Yeah.
I saw a story that there was a place that they didn't have that much rain.
Mm-hmm.
If it was really cold, so they bought like huge blocks of ice.
Right, so this is what I want to explain. Right, that's very good. So here we need to understand the following idea. Ideally, the mikveh should be rainwater that has not gone through pipes. Right, that's the idea. There are going to be places where you're not going to get that amount of rain, no matter what you do. And you can't have somebody bring it in a truck, because being in the truck is in a metal vessel that's going to make the water pasul, right? You can't even have a water truck. So what do you do? So here we have the very fascinating idea of the use of ice or snow. Actually, ice is the better thing to use. And that is the following. There is a concept that the only thing that becomes pasul meaning invalid, when it's in a vessel or a pipe, is water. Water becomes invalid when it's in a vessel or a pipe. But if it is in the form of ice, and it's put into the mikveh as ice, you take blocks of ice that you put in the mikveh, and it melts in the mikveh, that is called natural rainwater, because the transportation of it when it was ice is not a psul of she'uvim. She'uvim, drawn water, is only when it's water and not when it's ice. So what is sometimes done is that ice blocks, and that can be transported even by a truck. You can have a truck that brings ice, and the ice is deposited in the mikveh. Actually, it's not deposited in the mikveh usually, for various other reasons. It's deposited outside of the mikveh, and as it melts, it runs into the mikveh. In fact, I actually heard something. They had a Shaluchos conference recently. Maybe that's where you heard it too. And a woman was describing this, how, they finally brought the ice. Now this is 600 liters of ice, right? And she figured, Baruch Hashem, like the mikveh will be, open tomorrow. It takes a lot. She said, you don't know how long it takes for 600 liters of ice to melt. That's also going to be at least a week or so. But okay, but it's a week. It's not a year. And they wait. So imagine this. You have a mountain of ice, kind of a mountain of ice in the mikveh. And as it melts, the water moves into the mikveh, and you eventually have your 600 liters. Okay, so these are the two delivery systems, depending on where what type of country you live in. If it's a country with reasonable rain, the rain comes through the roof, and it enters the mikveh through cement, rubber, or plastic piping. If you live in a place that does not have that much rain, so we rely on the idea of transporting ice, putting the ice blocks right outside of the mikveh, and as the ice melts and goes into the mikveh, eventually the mikveh fills up, and you have your 600 liters, which is 40 saw. Okay, and this relies on the idea that the pasul of the she'uvim is only when it's water. And that is why it is said that when the ice is carried from the truck, it should be carried in baskets with big holes in them. Do you understand why? Because if you simply carry it in a regular receptacle, there's water that's going to accumulate. And that melted water is she'uvim, and when you dump it into the mikveh with the ice, you may be making the mikveh pasul. In other words, you want to be sure that any melted water before you put the ice down got discarded. Because any melted water that accumulates in the basket or the truck is she'uvim, and that's going to make the mikveh pasul. So you kind of imagine a basket with a lot of big openings in it, like a basket with big holes. So the ice is carried in those baskets, so any melted water goes away, and then you put the blocks of ice down on the floor, the blocks of ice melt, and you get your mikveh. Okay? And this can be done even if the original water was tap water. It's very interesting, because once it becomes ice, it loses its status. So you can actually, no, because ice is a new entity. Ice is not considered water. And therefore, even if you made ice from tap water, once it's ice, it can be taken to a mikveh, it can melt down, and that's how you fill a mikveh. But even that's not the end of things. That's not the end of things.
So why didn't they just make it from tap water, these Michelin? Why did they have to ship?
Well, the reason is because you need a lot. It's hard to make 600 liters of ice from your tap water. They could, but you need a lot of ice. I mean, just like I used to wonder when I was a kid, like, why do stores sell ice? I didn't understand, why do stores sell ice? Everybody has ice. Then you realize you're making a big party, right? So you need more ice than your refrigerator has. So kal v'chomer when it comes to the amount of ice you need for a mikveh. Yeah.
If you were building a mikveh near a lake or the ocean, could you take like plastic bowls and fill it with ocean water and then carry it there? Okay,
so here's the thing. Technically, you could not. You could build a plastic pipe. See, the problem is there are two different rules here. There is a rule about no metal. That's one rule. And then there's also a rule that the water cannot accumulate in a vessel, even if it's plastic. So the only way you can use the plastic or the cement or the rubber is if it's not in the shape of a vessel that holds the water. So you would not be allowed to use, even a plastic bucket would be a problem of she'uvim.
So
but a pipe is open and yes, as a matter of fact, you could. That would be the same principle at that point. But to have a vessel, like whether it's a bucket or a bowl, that would be no good even if it's plastic, because that would be called she'uvim. Okay, so far, right, so wherever you can go back, now you know how to build a mikveh, but this is not the end of it. This is not the end of it. Because here's the problem. Obviously, you want to be able to change water, right? People use the water, and the water gets dirty, and you want to change the water. Now, if you're going to be changing the water, then every 2 days, every 3 days, every 4 days, however often you change it, you're going to have to do the whole thing over again? That doesn't make sense. That's prohibitive. So how do you get around the idea that even once you have the mikveh, how are you going to be able to change it without having to start from square one? So here is the final halacha that you need to know. And that is, this is the, I don't want to call it a dirty secret because everything about mikveh is holy, but this is the secret about mikveh that a lot of people don't know. You never are going in the real mikveh. When you go, either you or your kalim, whatever it is, whether it's the vessels, whether it's a ger, whether it's a nida, whether it's a chassid who goes to the mikveh every day, it makes no difference. Nobody's going into the real mikveh. You're going into a fake mikveh. In other words, you're going into a bathtub that is filled up with tap water. So what's going on? It's not a kosher mikveh. So here is the important thing. The real kosher mikveh, which is filled up the way we described it, that's called the bore, the pit. And the halacha is, if there's a hole in the wall, right? Let's imagine this is the place that you go into. This is like the bathtub, filled up, drained, tap water. It's all shuvim. But if there's a hole connecting the shuvim to the bore, the chibor, the connection to the bore, kashers even the shuvim water. Okay? Which means to say the following. The way we maintain our mikvahs is that the bore almost never has to be refilled because nobody uses the bore. The bore remains a bore. In fact, you can't even see the bore. I mean, the bore is behind a solid wall. I mean, there is a door there because the rabbi has to check it, etc., for cracks and the like. There are things like that. But the bore water is never used. It's never used. All there is a hole. The hole is the circumference of 2 fingers. Imagine 2 fingers going around in a circle, kind of the size of a $50, an old $50, if you know what that was. It's a hole in the wall, and the hole in the wall means that some of the water in the bore touches. In fact, the word is hashaka. Hashaka is kissing. The water kisses the she'uvim. The she'uvim now become kosher for immersion. And we can drain and fill and drain and fill and drain and fill the actual immersion area as many times as we want. And even though technically that water is she'uvim, it is kosher through the process of hashaka. Hashaka is literally the kissing of the bore water, the mikveh water, with the non-mikveh water, with the she'uvim. Now, that's why this little opening, which is stopped up with a rubber stopper when the mikveh is not being used, that opening is absolutely crucial. Sometimes what happens is they forget to unstop the mikveh. If I went to the mikveh and the stopper was in the wall, my immersion is not valid. Because I went into a mikveh of she'uvim, right? It's okay, I use the Hebrew words there. I went into a mikveh of she'uvim, which was not attached to a kosher mikveh. That stopper, the removal of the stopper is what enables you to be tovel in the so-called mikveh. So the so-called, I'll call it mikveh because we call it a mikveh, but the so-called area that you're tovel in is not really the mikveh. The real mikveh is the bore, and the only reason you could be tovel where you're tovel is because of the concept of hashaka. So now this gives us the basic halachas. Okay? So now you understand. So now you understand why you could drain and fill and drain and fill and drain and fill the mikveh 10 times a day. And as long as you have hashaka to what's called the bore, you're going to be okay. Yeah.
How is it opened and closed?
So it's open and it's closed. There's a hole in the wall, and then they take a rubber like stopper, and the rubber stopper is plugged in.
Do they do that between each use?
No, usually they keep it open for the day. But when you have the last mikveh appointment is finished, let's say at night,
Then you plug it in.
they plug it in. Yeah. And then in other words, whenever they want to, I mean, obviously when they want to drain the regular mikveh, they have to have the stopper in. Otherwise, the water from the bore is going to go in as the water level.
Because that water's not like treated or anything. It's just.
No, the bore water is not treated.
No, the mikveh.
Well, it depends.
that you go in.
It actually is. It actually is. Depends. I mean, a lot of mikvahs are treated with chlorine, especially today. Yeah. No, they are. And halachically, you're allowed to treat. You are allowed to treat
You
the
are
water.
allowed to treat
Yeah,
it?
you are allowed to treat the water.
Okay.
Yeah. There are rules. In fact, there's an interesting shaila about can the water go through a filter, but we paskin that can also be the case. So now, let me mention, all right, so until now, this is standard stuff about mikvahs. So now, interestingly enough, Chabad has a unique chumrah. I don't know if you've ever heard, probably, I don't know if you ever discussed it. Sometimes you'll hear that a community has a regular mikvah, and the Chabad Shaluchim did their own mikvah. Now, why would that be so? I mean, why what's wrong? Regular mikvah is a regular mikvah. Because the Rebbe Rashab, and this has nothing to do with Hasidus. This is not a Hasidish thing. It's a matter of pure halacha. The Rebbe Rashab raised a halachic concern about the standard construction of mikveh. Again, this is not a Hasidus thing, although it happens to be a Chabad Chumrah. And that is the following. Hashaka works. What is the theory of Hashaka? That since I have a kosher bore of rainwater, it will kosher the water that's not rain, that's she'uvim, that's gone through pipes and the like, right? That's the theory of Hashaka. So the Rebbe Rashab was concerned, he was not the first one, other people were concerned as well, that over time, there's going to be an exchange of waters here, meaning to say, the water here is not kosher for the mikveh intrinsically. The water here is kosher. So that's good. So as long as you have 40 saw, 600 liters in here, you're going to be okay. But in the course of time, now usually they have much more than, usually they'll have 2,000 liters, whatever it would be. But in the course of time, if you go long enough, eventually some of the water on the other side of the hole is going to be coming from there, and some of the bore water is going to enter the mikveh and be drained out with the water. So there may come a time where you no longer have the 600 liters of kosher mikveh water in your bore. You'll have 600 liters, but maybe only 400 will be the original mikveh water, and 200 might be from the other one, right? So you have a problem here. How do you ensure over time that you will have your 600 liters in the bore that will kosher the mikveh water, right? So because of this, the Rebbe Rashab proposed that there be a bore on top of a bore, meaning the way it works is that this is called bore al gabe bore, meaning to say you have a bottom cistern that has 600 liters, and then you have a top cistern that has 600 liters, and it's the top cistern that is connected to the other water. And the way it works is that even if the top gets depleted because of the water exchange, you'll always have the bottom in which there's no exchange at all because nothing is moving. From the top, the surface tension prevents any part of the, water works with gravity, so the water in the bottom is never going to seep into the top. And therefore, it still becomes a hashaka because the way it works is the outer water is connected to the top one, but the top one is connected to the bottom one. So you have a ripple effect, literally, in which there'll be a hashaka. So this means, in other words, this is called bor al gabe bor, a pit on top of a pit. and it is designed to prevent the depletion of the requisite 40 sa'ah in the hashaka, so that you don't have to worry about depletion of the water. So it's a Chabad Chumrah. Many people do follow it, even if they're not Chabad. Other people do not follow it, and you'll find that shluchim will be very strict on it. That they will not. I mean, maybe for their congregants they won't be so strict if that's the only mikveh. I mean, it's better to go than not to go. I mean, they're not going to tell somebody who wants to keep Tyrus and Mishpacha, oh, your wife shouldn't go to the mikveh because it's not a bor al gabi bor. I mean, they're not going to say that. But for their own families, they will be fairly strict, and they will delay Tevilah until they could find a mikveh that's a bor al gabi bor. Yeah.
So, if you live in a place where there isn't a mikveh, but there's like an ocean or
Yeah.
a lake or something,
Yeah.
and that's very accessible to you,
Yeah.
so you could either go there or there's an established mikveh, but you'd have to drive like quite a long way. Is there a preference of which one you should do?
You're not talking about driving on Shabbos. You're talking about just generally.
No. Like
Yeah.
if you're a woman
Yeah.
and you need to go,
Yeah.
is, like, should you go to the established
I
mikveh?
think going to an established mikveh is better for a number of reasons. Number one, normally a woman is inspected before she goes to a mikveh to be sure there are no tangles in her hair and the like. And if you're going to a lake, you don't have the inspection or the supervision. And number two, lakes by definition, there's a certain compromise of modesty. And if you go at night, there's also dangers and risks. That's a dangerous thing to go at night into a lake or something like that. So I would advise normally to go to an established mikveh. But as I say, lakes are kosher. Now, again, a man-made lake is a problem, because a man-made lake, the water was delivered through pipes and the like, and then you have that problem, unless you have a hashaka, which you usually don't have. Okay, but natural lakes are good, oceans are good, rivers are not good because of zochalin. Yeah.
What about the same situation, like the close, there's a mikveh in your town that's not up to the standards of, I guess, chabad if you're chabad,
Yeah.
and the closest chabad one would be a 3-hour flight. Should you take the 3-hour flight? Or no?
Listen. I mean, it's hard for me to answer that question because it really depends on how Chabad are you. Meaning to say, most mainstream poskim do not require bor al gabi bor. So if you're just an Orthodox Jew, I would tell you it's fine. Go to the mikveh.
Yeah.
If you really follow all of the psukim of Chabad, you'd have to be strict on it.
It's okay to push off the mitzvah?
Well,
Like, you might not be able to.
I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is, you can go to the mikveh on time if it's not bor al gabi bor, but if it's bor. So I would say that if you really hold of Chabad minhagim in all respects, you would even push off going to the mikveh. Yeah, but as I say, most opinions do not require a bor al gabi bor.
Yeah.
So I could not tell you it's a halacha that you must follow this, but this was the chumrah of Chabad, and this is why you'll find that Chabad will sometimes make a point of making a separate mikveh. This is the reason. So again, this has nothing to do with Hasidus. This is not a Hasidic thing. This was a halachic concern that the Rebbe Rashab had. Yeah.
So, with either of our examples, what if you don't have the money to to make the travel to wherever would be the better ideal choice?
Yeah.
Then would that have an influence in the decision?
Well, yeah, I think so, because there is a concept that's called shas hatchak. Shas hatchak means extenuating circumstances, emergency circumstances. And for emergency circumstances, even when you're machmir, you're strict in a certain halachic area, you will be permitted to be lenient when it's an extenuating circumstance. And we also recognize that the relationship of husband and wife is a great mitzvah. So to simply say, "Oh, be machmer and don't be with your husband until that's not a positive thing either." That we understand that to be able to be fruitful and multiply, and be able to fulfill marital relations, is an important enough idea that we're not going to be machmir if that would be at the expense of being able to do that. Okay?
How would
Yeah.
a lake, like the lake or ocean situation?
Yeah.
What if you had somebody that could go with you?
No, well,
To check.
that is the procedure. Meaning, if you are using a lake or an ocean,
Well, yeah.
you do have to have a person with you. And by the way,
Or somebody who would like, because if you then have somebody like, could they like hold up like a towel or a sheet or something
Yeah,
so then nobody could see you?
well, yeah. I mean, that's that's what you would do. And by the way, the husband is allowed. This is very interesting. The husband is allowed to be his wife's mikveh attendant.
Really?
Even though you would think, hey, that sounds very bad. She's a nida. What do you? I mean, you're looking at her, but since she's gonna go to the mikveh right now, so we're not afraid that something will happen improperly in the few seconds before she goes to the mikveh. So the husband can come along. I think I'll tell you. I have a little bit of a problem with the towel. I'll tell you why. Unless you have two people, because I think it's very, very important. I mean, I am very concerned with safety here. And I want the husband to be free to, not be holding stuff that if his wife is, God forbid, gets in trouble, he sees it right away. If he's holding a towel, he's a little distracted or whatever it would be. I mean, you have in the ocean in particular, you have undercurrents and other things that can be very, very difficult. So it's really it's a last resort. But for kalim, it could be very good. If you have to be toiveling utensils, which we're going to talk about now, it might be very convenient to go to a lake or an ocean, and there's no real danger. You go during the day and you just put it in. Okay, so this is kind of a little bit of a survey about the laws of mikvah. I don't know if you ever went through them before, but just to be familiar with some of the complications in a mikvah. Now we know that a mikvah is used for a lot of things. The most common use of mikveh in the religious world today is for nida. When a woman is a nida, she's not allowed to have marital relations or even affectionate touching until, and a lot of other rules like passing things to each other, until she counts at least 12 days, 7 clean days without bleeding, and goes to the mikveh. Let me just mention an interesting question. I may have discussed this before, so forgive me if I'm repeating it. A very interesting mikveh question that rabbis sometimes have to face is, what if you have a man and a woman who are not married? They're not married, but they're interested in becoming more religious, Shabbos and kosher. Now, should I encourage, I'm a rabbi, right? Should I encourage unmarried woman to go to the mikveh?
Yeah.
This is not such an easy question because let me.
Relations anyway, so can we give an
No. So here's the thing. You have to understand. You have to understand that although Judaism does prohibit premarital relations, but premarital relations is not as severe a sin as having relations with a nida. Having relations with a nida is a much more serious sin. So here's the question. They're having relations anyway. They're sinning anyway. Okay, but if she doesn't go to the mikveh, their sin is a very, very serious sin. If they go to the mikveh, it becomes a less serious sin. So the question is, should I encourage them to downgrade their avera from very severe to just severe? Or should my attitude be, hey, if you guys are sinning, it's none of my business to give you a legitimation or a hechsher to what you're doing. So different rabbanim go different ways. I mean, some rabbanim will actually
no, unless they straight up tell you what they're doing. There's no way you could 100%.
Well, okay, but sometimes you know. Yeah, sometimes you know. I mean, listen. There were cases that I knew. I mean, they told me, and I had no reason to assume that they were lying.
Wouldn't that make her his concubine if she went to the mikvah?
Well, she's his concubine whether she goes to the mikveh or not. Mikveh has nothing to do with the concubine. I mean,
No. What's concubine then?
concubine is simply a sexual relationship without marriage. living out of wedlock is a concubine. So that's all. So mikveh would not make a difference there.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting question. Some Rabbanim feel that there's a mitzvah to minimize prohibition. Others say that you should never do anything that gives a seal of approval on improper behavior. So that's an interesting question. So, but be it as it may, mikveh, at least for married women, is the most common use of mikveh. The second use of mikveh is for conversion. A non-Jew who wants to become Jewish must immerse in a mikveh. The third is that some men will go to the mikveh when they have a seminal emission, and some will go every day, and some will go Erev Shabbos, etc. These are not mandatory immersions, but some will go out of a sense of Kedusha and the like. The common denominator of all immersions is there cannot be chatzitza. What is the word chatzitza? Chatzitza is a separation between your skin and the water. So if there's anything on you, such as makeup,
Piercing.
well, a piercing itself is not a problem, but if there's if you have a piece of jewelry on you, there would be a problem. Tangled hair, that's why you got to brush the hair, that's why you have to wash the hair. All of these things potentially can invalidate immersion, because the water has to be able to reach every part of the body. And one of the major issues, I'm not going to go over the laws of Nida right now, although somebody asked me about going over that, but I'm not going to go over it right now. But one of the major issues is, how does a woman prepare for going to the mikveh because of all of these laws of chatzitza, even things like eating meat. The day a woman goes to the mikveh raises some problems because the meat gets stuck in the teeth, and as a result, the water, of course you don't need water to go into your mouth, but if you have stuff in your teeth that would block the water if it did come in, that may invalidate the immersion. Okay, so I'm not going to go over those details right now, but this is a whole mikzoah, a whole subject that is called chatzitza, and it doesn't only apply to women, it will also apply to converts, to gerim, and it will apply even to men who are going to the mikveh for whatever reason. There cannot be a chatzitza. But we now have, so I mentioned three situations of mikveh. One is nida, the second is ger, and the third is seminal emission, or before Yom Tovim or Shabbos or the like. All of these involve people going to the mikveh. But we do have an unusual halacha that unfortunately even some frum people don't keep. It's very, very interesting. This is one of the halachos that, particularly in the modern Orthodox community, sometimes simply gets forgotten legamre. And that is, there is a notion of immersing vessels. Tevilas kalim, it is called. Immersion of a kli, of a vessel. And this does not apply to any vessel, right? So for example, if I buy a computer, I don't have to put my computer in the mikveh. But this applies very specifically to vessels that are utilized in the preparation or consumption, I'll give you some examples, of food. It is very much food linked. And before you use the vessel for the preparation or consumption of food, you have to bring it to the mikveh. The overall idea of this is that shulchan domel lemizbeach, this is a teaching of our sages, that a Jewish table, the eating of food, the serving and eating of food, is like an altar, bringing a korban to God. We believe that you eat with brachos, you eat with hachnasas orchim, whatever it would be. You're eating in order to serve Hashem. That is a divine service. And therefore, the same way, when a goy becomes a Jew, they have to go to the mikveh to convert. When food utensils are going from the animalistic eating of a non-Jew to the holy eating of a Jew, the vessels have to undergo a conversion process. And the immersion in the mikveh is the conversion of the pot. So the rule is this, therefore.
I never knew that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, yeah.
When you say eating, that includes
Yes, yes, yes. I'll try to give you a lot of examples. So here is the rule. If you buy a kli, well, either buy or get it as a gift, it makes no difference, a utensil that was either owned by a non-Jew or was manufactured by a non-Jewish company, even if you got it from a Jew. So it makes no difference, manufacturer, wholesaler, retailer. If there was a guy who was ownership in any of those processes, and, so three conditions. Number one, it has to be owned by a guy at some point, whether it's manufacture, wholesale, retail. Number two, it must be either metal or glass. Metal or glass. So if it's plastic, if it's wood, does not need to be toiveled at all.
Clay?
Huh?
Clay?
Even clay, I'll get to it. Stoneware does not have to be toiveled, right? So condition one is ownership by a guy. Condition two is wood. I'm sorry. Condition two is metal or glass. Metal or glass. Condition three, it must be what is called a kli su'udah. Now this is a very important term that's a little complicated. Kli su'udah means a utensil that is connected with a meal. M-E-A-L. Now by that we mean it is either something that you cook with, pots, pans, or it's something that you eat with, cutlery, plates, if they're either glass or metal, and the like. Okay, so these are the three conditions. Owned by a guy, metal or glass, and it's something you either cook with or eat with. Now, let me go over a few situations and see if how this works. So clearly, pots and pans from a non-Jewish enterprise, got to be tovel. Dishes, well, if they're glass, got to be tovel. If they're metal, got to be tovel. Now, one particular issue is, let's take something like China. Very simple thing, China. Now, what is China? China is actually glazed earthenware, meaning it's made from clay, and there's a glass glaze over it. Now, pure earthenware is called stoneware. I don't know if they use that term, but that's... So, a regular pottery, you don't have to be tovel, actually. If I have a pottery cup, a pottery mug, I don't have to be tovel. But a china mug, and a lot of pottery is glazed. You can actually see it, if it has a certain shine or a sheen. So, that's a machlokas. Do I look at it as a glass vessel? Or do I look at it as a pottery vessel? So, in such a situation, you're tovel without a bracha, but what's better to do is, you should be tovel it along with something like a metal fork, that for sure you have to make a bracha, and then have kavana, right? So this is a general rule. Whenever you have something that may not need a bracha, and you're not sure, but you're supposed to be tovel it to be sure, so you try to combine it with another item where you can definitely make the bracha. Okay, now, let's take a few things. What about something like a can opener? Now, a can opener does touch the food. I mean, as it's metal, and when you open a can, it's touching the food. But that's not the test. The test is not if it touches the food, it needs to be left. It has to be something that either prepares the food to be eaten, or you eat the food with it. A fork, a plate. A can opener is not connected to preparing the food at all. Okay, so people make a mistake. A lot of people think, oh, if it touches the food, you got a problem. That's not true. It has to be preparing the food or it has to be eating the food. So a can opener does not have to be toiveld, even if it touches the food when you open the can. Now, what about canisters? This is another issue. This is an interesting issue. Canisters. Let's say I have metal canisters. And in the metal canisters, I store anything. I store candy, I store rice, I store spaghetti. So that's a big machlokas. You'll find different poskim. Some poskim say you do not have to be toivel canisters, because the canister is not cooking the food, and the canister is not the thing that you're eating the food from. So there are poskim that say that canisters are not clay suda. A canister is like a container, a container that you keep things in.
Like a pan. Like where
Like
the cookies are.
people keep a cookie, yeah, like the stuff you have outside there. You have the sugar, the cocoa, right? All those things out there. Those are called canisters. Okay? So I don't know what Mayanot did, but do you have to be tovel a canister? It's a machlokas. Once again, it's a machlokas. These are not here to give you definitive guidelines. I just want you to understand the concept.
Put it on the safe side then?
No, so on the safe side, you're tovel without a bracha, and then what you do is you combine it with another item that you make a bracha
So
on.
you would toivel that with, let's say,
With a fork. With a fork. That's
so that
correct.
you can make the bracha.
That's correct.
But
Now,
wouldn't that be like, you know how when someone says kiddush, they have you in mind?
Yes.
Would that be like, oh, well, I'm having these jars in mind?
yeah, that's correct. That's
So
exactly
wouldn't
right.
that be an issue?
No, why is it an issue? In other words,
Because if you're not supposed to say the bracha, but you're having these.
no, but you also have in mind to cover the fork. So
Yeah.
you're fine. Your bracha is not in vain because it's also covering the fork.
Okay.
So that's exactly what you do. Whenever you have a doubt, the way you get out of the doubt is you also make sure that you're covering something else that for sure needs a bracha.
So this is the same topic, but a little off.
Yeah.
If you're making kiddush for all of us, and there's another man here, and you say, I'm making kiddush, but I have you all in mind, and then he decides to make kiddush after that.
Yeah.
Is that an issue?
So it really depends what was in his mind. Meaning like this: if he had in mind to be
The
Yotze,
other guy.
yeah, if that man had in mind to be Yotze my Kiddush, and then he changes his mind after I make Kiddush, it would be a blessing in vain for him to say Kiddush.
So it would be the
But if he had in mind
he's gonna do it.
that he's going to do it, then even if I said I'm doing it for him, he doesn't have to go along with it.
Okay.
By the way, neither do you. You can also decide you want to make your own Kiddush
Would
if
it be
you
the
want.
same with the cookie jars and the fork?
To say what?
Like, if you toiveled the fork and
Yeah.
said the bracha,
Yeah.
and you did like one cookie jar and then you wanted to do another one, but you already said the bracha, you have to say it after.
Oh,
That makes sense.
yeah, well, that would be a problem because again, on the cookie jar itself, you would not make a bracha, so you'd have to find another fork
Okay.
to do it again. Okay, now let me mention another, again, I just want you to understand the types of questions here. Let's take something like poultry shears. Those are those, you know what they're,
Scissors?
the big scissors that you can cut through a chicken. Now, poultry shears, you would think, should require immersion in a mikveh because they're metal, right? They're used in food preparation. But here we have another. See, there are a lot of different concepts here. That some poskim say that in order to be chayev, in order to be called a kli seuda, it has to be a kli that brings the food to the final state of it being edible. So a pot brings the food to its final state. The poultry shear typically does not, because it can be used after the food is cooked, but often it's used when the chicken is raw. So since it is preliminary to final consumption, it doesn't have the status of a food preparation thing. Again, I'm not giving you a psak, I just want you to be aware, because you're going to have different shilas about being toivel things. I want you to understand the concept. What about a salt shaker and a pepper shaker?
Yeah.
Now, you might say, oh, isn't that a canister? Is this a small canister? The answer is no. Because salt and pepper shakers I use at the table. And because I use them at the table, they are like plates and the like. I use them while I'm eating. So if it is a glass, most of them today are plastic, but if it is a glass shaker, or even if it's plastic, but the top is metal, you would be Toivel, you would be Toivel.
Two questions. One, if I got pottery from a Jew and from a non-Jew, is there any difference in what to do with them?
If it's pottery that's
If
not
it's
glazed,
glazed.
then for sure there's no obligation of mikveh. The only question is, was the pottery used? Was it used for anything? I
Like saying it was just made by these people.
No, then it's the same. The halacha is exactly the same. There's no restriction.
Okay.
Yeah. But now again, I want to clarify one thing. Be sure you understand the difference conceptually between tevila and koshering. These are two different issues. Koshering a vessel is when a vessel was used with non-kosher food. And that requires that you purge the vessel of whatever non-kosher food it absorbed, and that's either by boiling water, or by fire, or blowtorches, or whatever it is. Tevila is a separate mitzvah that has nothing to do with whether it's kosher or not, even if the vessel was never used at all. You got to be tovel. But it's also important to understand, an untoveled vessel is not a treif vessel. Let's assume that somebody was not tovel their pots, and they serve me food. That food is not treif. It was wrong for them not to be tovel, but the food is not treif, unless treif food was cooked in that pot. So don't confuse this. There's a mitzvah to be tovel, but the food is not treif if it was cooked in an untoveled pot.
Okay, but if the pot,
Yeah.
sorry, if the pot was made by a non-Jew
Yeah,
or manufactured or whatever,
yeah.
it's not treif, even if you didn't boil it, even it's unused.
It's not treif. No, it's not
Like I go to
treif.
Walmart, I buy a pot. The
Yeah.
food isn't treif.
Well, no, why would it be? Well, actually, okay, this raises another question. The truth of the matter is, you do have to know, this is really a totally different, unrelated question, that a lot of pots might in fact be treif, because pots are tested before they're put on the market.
They're left sitting
And
out.
sometimes they test them by putting in non-kosher oil, and the oil's not kosher, lard or whatever it would be. So that actually is an issue. But in terms of not being toiveld, it's not treif. It's not treif. So now let me raise one of the perennial questions that people always have, and that is, oh yeah, I'm sorry.
If you have something like this water bottle, metal water bottle, plastic top.
Yeah,
So, do you tovel the bottle but not the top?
yeah. You don't have to be toiveld the top, just the bottle itself. Now,
Can you
yeah,
do the top?
yeah. It's no avera. It's superfluous.
You
That's
don't
all.
need to.
Yeah. Now, here is the perennial question. This is the number one tevila question. When you have various electronic appliances,
Yeah, like an air fryer.
you have fryers, you have coffee makers,
Thermometer.
you have urns, tea urns.
Thermometer.
Huh?
What about a meat thermometer?
No, so a meat thermometer, that's interesting. A meat thermometer, huh?
Maybe like a can opener?
Yeah, meat thermometer is not a problem. But a coffee maker, an urn, a tea urn, a toaster, right? All of these things. Now, what's the problem people have? People say, oh, you're not supposed to immerse it in water. If you immerse it in water and you plug it in, it's going to explode. Whatever it's going to be, it's going to be destroyed. So what do you do about being toivel these electronic appliances? I mean, they are metal, and they're involved in the preparation of food, right? So, but pashtus, you'd start off with the idea that you're supposed to put them in the mikveh, right? So how do you get around it? So there are a few different ways to deal with this. Method number one is grin and bear it, which actually is what I do, and this can be done, meaning to say the following. The product will get damaged normally only if you plug it in before it is thoroughly dried out, and then it short circuits. If you immerse it in the mikveh, and then don't use it for a week or 10 days, and you can even use your hairdryer to dry it out, usually it's going to be fine. So now again, I don't want to. I'm not giving any warranties, but in my experience, usually it's going to be fine. That actually is the best way of doing it. Meaning, toivel and don't use for a week to 10 days, and use your hair dryer to dry it out. You should be okay. However, there are heterim not to be toivel, and let me mention the heter of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein argues that something is called a food preparation utensil only if the food would be inedible unless you would use the utensil. So a pot cooks things like potatoes, it cooks things that are not edible. But a toaster and a coffee maker or an urn, you're just heating up water that is drinkable without the heating, and the bread is edible without the toasting. So that's not called a food preparation instrument or utensil, and that is a heter not to be toivel. Now that's not going to work for everything. There may be types of griddles, like say waffle makers. I don't know. A waffle maker might not have a heter like that, because the waffle maker, if the way you normally use it is you pour dough and you pour batter into it, the batter is not edible. It's not like a tea urn or the like. So you'd have to know that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's heter would not work for all of these things. Yeah.
I have a really dumb question.
Yeah.
If something becomes unkosher, do you toivel it, like after you kosher it, do you toivel it before or after? Or do you
Okay, all right. So here's the thing. If something becomes, one second. If your own thing becomes non-kosher, and you kosher it, you don't have to be toivel it again, right? Now the issue is, if I buy a non-kosher used utensil from a guy, what is the sequence? Should I be toivel and then kosher, or can I kosher and then toivel?
Yeah.
Either order is fine. The order does not make a difference. You can kosher before toivel or kosher after toivel. Now, there's some interesting questions about this. Let's say you're a non-Jew and you convert to Judaism. Now, think about this. Some say that essentially you are a Jew that has received everything from a guy. You're the guy and you're the Jew. Meaning, if I receive a pot from a guy, I got to take it to the mikveh. If I was a guy who converted, I'm a guy who received, I'm a Jew who received something from a guy. In other words, every non-Jew who converts has to immerse all of his utensils in the mikveh. And if he immersed them before he converted, that wouldn't count, because now he's a Jew that's getting it from a non-Jew. So that's an interesting chumrah. He could kosher. So again, this is a good example. If I'm a non-Jew about to convert, and I have non-kosher dishes in my house, I can have them koshered before my conversion, as long as I'm careful not to make them treif again. I can have them koshered before my conversion, but I can't toivel them before my conversion.
How?
How what?
How do you have them?
How do you have them koshered?
Yeah.
You call your Chabad shaliach and
Oh,
kosher.
you can't do it yourself.
You can do it yourself too.
Oh.
I mean, you're told what to do. You can do it yourself. A guy can kosher utensils.
Oh, really? So
As
if
long
you have
as-
a housekeeper, they could kosher your things.
Yeah, but you need to be sure that they're doing it right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was wondering.
A guy can kosher as long as the guy has the right instructions and as long as the guy is supervised. But a guy cannot immerse his utensils, because as soon as it goes into the possession of a Jew, there's a new obligation of tevilah. You see? So the guy would have to, not the guy, he's the ger. The ger, the guy who converts to Judaism, would have to be toivel. Now the same thing by Bechiras Chametz. There's an interesting thing. You know, most of you are going to probably sell your chametz or go to the rabbi and sell your chametz to a guy.
Yeah.
So have you ever heard that you're selling not only the chametz, but you're also selling the chametz that's absorbed in your pots and pans? Because you don't want to own any chametz. But it's brought down lahalacha that you have to sell only the chametz that's absorbed in the pots and pans, but do not sell the pots and pans. Why is that? Because if you sell the pots and pans to the guy, when all of this is repurchased after Pesach, you're going to have to take it to the mikveh again. So in order not to have to take it to the mikveh again, you are not selling the pots and pans, you're only selling the chametz in the pots and pans.
Would you need to tovel a water machine?
Yeah, so that's a big problem. A water machine is a gigantic, big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so number one, like Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, for sure you would not, because it's only water, and it's not making the water more drinkable. I mean, it's drinkable without that. Number two, some say as well that the chiyuv of tefillah is only when something is described as a utensil. Now, a utensil halachically means something that is commonly, easily moved from place to place. Things that are big, things that are heavy, that commonly stay in one place, are not utensils. That's why, for example, you don't have to be toivel a stove. Think about this. If I have to be toivel a pot, then why shouldn't I have to be toivel a stove? Now the answer is, if you have like a burner, maybe you do have to be toivel, like a small burner. But if it's a whole stove, since that's something that's not moved from place to place, it doesn't have the status of a utensil, and therefore would not require
What
tefillah.
about an ice maker?
Uh,
Like ice trays.
Yeah, so that goes back. Yeah, so that goes back to so number one, an ice tray would be if it's a metal ice tray. A lot of ice trays are plastic. Yeah, if it's a metal ice tray. So again, like Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, you would not have to, and others would treat an ice tray like a canister. Really, it's and therefore they would allow you not to be toivel. Yeah.
I'm wondering that if plastic and wood doesn't need to be toivel,
Yes.
why do they toivel?
I don't know. It's really a chumrah. It's not. It's absolutely. Not. Are you sure they do that? I did not hear that.
Everybody that I know does plastic.
I think certain reusable plastic.
So plastic. Okay. Plastic. There is a bit of a shaila about plastic. Some will say plastic you have to be toivel. Wood is totally unknown to me that there's any
I
reason.
haven't seen anybody toivel wood, but I know
Okay, so plastic. Okay, that goes back to the idea that. See, plastic, that's the problem. I mean, as the Torah says, metal, yeah, and wood, not. And plastic is in between. Plastic is not described, so the question is, do you assign it to the A column or to the B column? So there is a shaila about plastic. I mean, I was telling you the halacha, but some would be machmer in plastic. I don't know any basis to be machmer on wood or on earthenware, on plain earthenware, unless it's glazed with China. So the final issue, again, there are a lot of halachas. I don't want to overwhelm you with details. I just want to mention one other common halacha. Two more halachas that I want to mention. Halacha number one is disposable aluminum tins. People buy these loaf tins or whatever, even bigger ones, and it's metal, right? Once again, you use it to cook food. So the question is, if it's chad pa'ami, if it's disposable, are you mechuyev to be toivel? So here I want to correct people with a common misconception. You will sometimes hear people say, you are allowed to use something one time without being toivel. That's not true. If you buy a pot that's intended to be used multiple times, you're not supposed to use it even one time without being toivel. But there is a concept that if the vessel is intended to be used only once, in other words, it's not that the first time I don't have to be toivel. If it's intended to be used only once, there are some opinions who will not require you to be toivel. So there is a basis to be lenient. Others will be toivel without a bracha, and they'll make a bracha on a fork, or whatever it is. Others will punch a hole in the bottom of it, so it's kind of a broken vessel, although that may impair the utility of it as a cooking vehicle. But again, be sure you understand the difference. The statement, you can use it one time without tevilah, is false. The statement, if it's only going to be used one time, I don't have to be toivel, That may be true. That there is a machlokus about that. But then you have to be careful because a lot of times people do reuse aluminum tins. They don't always throw them out after one use. Yeah.
So let's say I have an aluminum tin and I use it once. And
Yeah.
because they are meant to be single use, I'm not thinking about if I'm gonna use it
Yeah.
again. But then after whatever I cook, I see that it's very easily
Yeah.
clean.
Yeah.
Should I Toivel it after?
Yes.
And it's not a problem that I didn't Toivel it before?
Well, as I say, it doesn't make your food treif. That goes back to my earlier point. Even though you shouldn't have used it.
Should I not, I can still eat that food that I use.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm saying. In other words, the food. This is important. The food does not become treif.
Okay,
Okay, after the fact.
so nothing really happened, so that.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Now, one final. Yeah, sorry.
If you know that you're probably going to end up reusing that.
Then you
Then you should
take it to the
probably
mikveh.
throw it
That's
in the
correct. That is correct. That is correct.
What if you use it, like, use it once, you wash it out, and then you're like, I can use it again?
No. So at that point, you take it to the mikveh.
But even, like, the second time, you're like, I know I can only use it one time after this, should you still?
Oh, I see. In other words,
Like
you can
now
only.
it becomes single use again.
Oh, I see. That's an interesting question. Meaning, your total uses are 2, and you didn't.
But the second time,
that's
you're
a good
like,
point.
single use.
I would think in that case you don't. Yeah, I think it's a good
It's like
point.
the same thing with the fork. Do you ever use like a fork for your
Yeah.
coffee?
Yeah.
Not a fork, a spoon, and then
Yeah.
like think like
You're talking about a plastic spoon.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Then
Think like,
reuse
throw
it.
it away, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you have a second cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in that case I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't be typing it in that case.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the final issue I want to raise is an issue that's very nogea to Balei Tshuva, and this is a halacha of the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah says, based on what I said before, that even though the food is not treif, but you yourself are not allowed to use a vessel that was not immersed, even one time, unless it's aluminum foil made to be chad pa'ami. In other words, I'm not allowed to eat on untoveled dishes. I'm not allowed to eat with an untoveled fork. I'm not allowed to do that. Yeah, the food is not treif if I transfer it to something else, but I'm not allowed to use dishes that are not toveled. That's the halacha the Ramah writes. So the question becomes, how can I eat at my parents' house? Let's assume my parents are not observant, but they accommodate me. They made kosher food for me. They even koshered all the utensils, or they got me separate pots and pans, but they haven't been toveled. So how am I allowed to use them? Now, do I have to have plastic or paper? So here, many say the Ramah is a big problem, that you can't eat on those pots and pans, or I'm sorry, you can't eat on the plates unless you're tovel. But Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach has an important heter, and he says the prohibition against using non-toveled pots is only on the owner of the pots. It's like a punishment because they have an obligation to take it to the mikveh. But if I'm a guest or a child, and these are not my pots and pans, I don't have a problem eating off them. In other words, it's not my problem, it's my parents' problem. And if at that point in their lives they're not concerned about that, that is not my problem. It's not a kashrus problem. That's a very important leniency that can help in a lot of those difficult cases. Okay, so again, I don't want to overwhelm you with detail, but are there any other questions about this that I could help you with? Alrighty, so maybe we'll stop here. And again, I just repeat, as I always repeat, if there's anything you want me to talk about, please send me an email.